Good morning, YouTube. It is 10 a.m. here in Texas, and it is time for another Salty Texas production. So, what are we looking at before we get to the project? This doesn't really encapsulate what the wind is like here in West Texas. This is like a time span of like 20 minutes, but it was windy this day. Really didn't capture that. So what we're doing in today's project is doing a scrap bowl using a bunch of the scrap leftover that I have. I feel like I've had a real good handle on all the intricacies that kind of go in with creating some bigger projects. So the next series of videos is going to be larger projects using a lot of this scrap wood, which in theory are all the same. However, everyone has its own unique build. So got everything cut down. Now we're just gluing everything up. And I've learned to put this piece on top to attach a waste block to attach the faceplate on it. So here we are, and we're going to do a little bit of shoddy camera work. I'm going to do this in one take. I actually haven't watched this actual video yet, but we're just going to, we're going to ad-lib it. So here we are inside of the house. I think I started this project back in December of 2020. Started it in 2021 in January and didn't get to finish it until about February of 2021. This thing took 3 months because of work and everything that I had going on at the time. It was freezing cold outside, and the reason why I'm doing this indoors is because the epoxy will not do well if there are crazy fluctuations, too hot, too cold. So I had to do it indoors, got everything spun down. So here we are in the pressure pot, 4.5 hours, and really good casting, translucent, clear color. Everything stayed, attached. No big major bubbles or blowouts on the blank itself. Everything up until this point is looking relatively well, and I'm excited about that, obviously. So here we are out of the mold, and we'll get a little bit better look. Calling this one the Blue Mess, and a lot of these bowls are just messes in general. So yeah, they do pretty good on the lathe. And we're using East Coast resin for this particular project. And we're just going to basically get this turned down and attached up. So here we go. I'm going to attach that waste block like we usually do. I think I probably have used this waste block a couple of times. You can see there's already a circle pattern there from where the previous faceplate was. Using that hot glue and attaching it. And then we're taking our crappy Ryobi drill. People sleep on Ryobi. Ryobi is not a bad product. If you're getting into woodworking or you're new or you're on a budget, Ryobi will work. Hell, I have a Black & Decker drill that works just as well. So here we are, faceplate is on, and now we have got it on the lathe. And I've also learned for my larger projects using my MIDI lathe. So if you have a MIDI lathe like I do, it's a Nova 2 Comet. It's a middle of the road type of lathe. If you're going to use big blocks of wood or larger pieces of resin blanks, you really got to get a lot of stabilization. So really push that back on the back of the workbench there so it'll have some kind of stabilization. And in some later projects that you'll see in the coming weeks, I use a unique technique to keep everything stabilized. I want to get a larger lathe a little bit later, but I'm going to try to burn this one out until I have to get a new one, or I just outgrow it, which I feel in a way I've already grown it, but yeah, we'll get there eventually. So you can see there a lot of dancing on the lathe or on the workbench itself, and when I'm actually doing this part of it, making the mortise, I really don't notice it all that much, but watching it back on the video, definitely not a good thing, because you don't want your lathe flying off your workbench and causing a catastrophic injury. So be careful, my wood turners. So now once we got the mortise all built, we're just getting that nice round edge to the bottom using the round carbide tool that I absolutely love and absolutely need to sharpen, and getting everything nice and even as much as possible to avoid flipping it over and having it unbalanced. So once we got that done and taken care of, this is actually one of my favorite things to do, is popping off that waste block where the hot glue blank was attached, and we're just taking a regular flat chisel, and we broke it. It happens sometimes though. It's waste wood. I use a lot of pine for these projects because I have a lot left over from some tables that I've built, and I probably need to show you guys my waste pile where I get all this stuff. It's just mostly scrap fence post wood is mostly what I use. It's cheap. It's available in bulk at like Home Depot or Lowe's. And it turns out really good projects, as you'll see here at the end. So here we are, got it reversed on the chuck, and now we're just getting that lip taken care of and flattening, making everything nice and even. And you saw, I don't know if you saw, you can go back and rewind it, but there was a bubble kind of in the middle, and now we're trying to get that taken care of as much as possible. You saw it right there. And we're just trying to take off as little material as possible, but trying to preserve the actual balance of the bowl itself. And really shoddy camera work. I'm going to try to get better at the camera work, people. I'm very sorry. Not a lot of space in my garage with all the stuff that I have going on. But here we are. Now we're just gouging, or starting the gouging process. We got everything nice and balanced, and we're just gouging out the middle. And again, you can see there's a lot of movement on the lathe, which once you start hitting away from the actual pine board, because in the middle it's mostly just scrap pine, so I'm having a real easy time getting everything gouged out. But once you start hitting the corners, the sides a little bit deeper, it's a mixture of pine board and resin, and it reacts, and there's a lot of chatter on the chisel itself. So that's primarily why I get a lot of movement once I'm starting to gouge. And you can see there where, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, I'm crazy close to the edge of my workbench. And by this time, I didn't really realize it. And luckily, don't worry, the lathe didn't fly off the bench or anything. So if that's what you're anticipating, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Even though I have had some very close calls. And I've had some really mean comments about my woodworking technique, which I am sorry. I'm an amateur, people. This is a hobby. Go to somewhere professional if you need a better woodworking advice. Nick Zametti, I recommend him on YouTube. He's really, really good. He's a pro. He knows what he's doing. He has an actual standing lathe. So if you're ever interested in standing lathe videos, Nick Zametti makes absolute gem projects. I really recommend his channel. So here we are, got most of the bowl gouged out already, and now we're just working the lip with the round carbide tool, trying to get everything nice and even and flat. So we can go ahead and start working the edges a little bit closer. And up to this point, didn't have any major issues other than the lathe almost falling off the table, which would have been catastrophic. So here we are, hitting the side of it. By this time, I've noticed there's a little bit of an imbalance, and I'm trying my damnedest to take as little material off and make everything as balanced as possible. And I have like a death grip on the tool. You can't really tell with the gloves, but I'm basically shaking, hoping to God I don't get a lot of chip out. And there on the side of the bowl, we'll have to come back and fix that little part where there's a little bit of a gouge. So here we are, just finishing up the back end of the bowl. Now we're starting to get a little bit closer to the lip of the bowl and deciding how thin the side project or the side of the bowl is going to be. And I like the lips of the bowl to be very thin. I think that looks a lot better in presentation. Plus the translucency, you can see a lot more of the wood in it. And I think at this point I'm taking the round carbide tool and just really working the edges. At a certain point, the gouging, the bowl gouge just isn't effective anymore, and you got to come back with the square and the round carbide tool. And we're almost done, just taking it down as far as we can, trying not to hit the mortise, but making it as deep as possible for the actual bowl depth itself. And here was a little part where there was a little bit of bubbling, and I didn't want to take off material, so I took 15-minute epoxy, and I'm basically now just trying to glue. It's epoxy, but it's 15-minute epoxy, and I used a different dye, and it looks really shitty. I let that set up for about an hour, but it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. It was like a pretty shoddy patchwork, but I think overall it did okay. It wasn't the worst project I've ever done, but definitely it could have been a little bit better. I should have used I was just being lazy, and I was in a hurry. I wasn't being lazy. I was impatient. I was like, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. 15-minute epoxy will work, but there's a lot of bubbling, as you can see there. And once we start the sanding process, it's really apparent that I probably should have just went ahead and filled it with regular epoxy and put it in the pressure pot. But I just didn't want to. Oh well. So here we are sanding it down 340 grit all the way up to the micro mesh like we usually do. And look, it looks absolutely spectacular in this little portion right here. We're almost done with the project, and we're just going to come back and hit it with that wood wax that I absolutely love so much. And beautiful piece, in my opinion, turned out really well. No major issues other than it literally took nearly 3 months to complete this project because of work. And you guys are probably watching this in June or July. And I didn't get done with this until about February, late February. So here we are polishing everything up, and there's some more shoddy camera work. Hope you enjoyed the project. Don't forget to subscribe. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next project. Peace. All right, project is done, and you might not know this, but I probably did it in the commentary. It's actually been a month since I started this project and finished it just today. I am in the National Guard and was on snow duty. The weather was bad. I've been gone for 2 weeks. Work stuff, all kinds of stuff has been going on. But we finally got this project finished. It looks absolutely amazing. With the exception of this little part here, I didn't want to cut deep down because I would have lost a lot of the top lip of the bowl, and I was already down on material and didn't want to take away from the bowl. So it's a bit of a blemish, but I think it's kind of unique. I guess that's what artists say when they fuck up. It's unique. But we are still doing projects. You guys probably won't watch this until the summer, June or July, but this actually took me between the end of January and most of February to get completed, just because of time constraints and work obligations and life stuff happens. But we had that pretty bad snowstorm. If you watch, I made a goofy video when I was mobilized to help with snow duty about how bad it was up here. But we were lucky. We didn't have it too bad. A lot of people had it a lot worse. I hope everybody made it through that okay. But here we are, just a big bowl. Nice and blue. I'm going to give this one away like I do all my other projects. But hope you like the project. Don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the end of the year. Tell your friends about the channel, and I'll see you in the next project. All right, peace.